Usually with children who've been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, they have a higher receptive language and a lower expressive language. So what does that look like? That looks like my child is not saying a lot, but they understand what you're saying. They understand what you're saying. They'll probably giggle at what you're saying. I don't ever want you parents to think that your children are not smart.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. I am your host, Maria Davis-Pierre, licensed mental health counselor and the CEO and founder of Autism in Black, Inc. Today, I am here with Quintina Briscoe, who is a dedicated speech language pathologist and founder of Pediatric Speech Lab. With over a decade of experience, she specializes in bridging the gap for families waiting for therapy services for their children who are autistic. Quintina's passion extends beyond therapy, empowering parents with the knowledge and tools they need to support their child's development. Her compassionate and innovative approach has transformed countless lives, making her a trusted advocate and leader in the field. Her newest inclusive community, the Empowered Parent Circle, equips parents to confidently navigate their child's diagnosis, positioning them as the primary advocate and expert for their child. Enjoy me and Quintina's conversation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. We have another very special guest here. If you attended the 5th annual Autism in Black conference, then this is a familiar face. She killed the stage, and she is an SLP that is now in the Autism in Black network. So I am so happy to have Quintina here today with us.
Yes, and I'm so super happy to be here.
Thank you. So you have been doing this work for over a decade. Can you share with us what led you to specialize in supporting autistic children and their families, especially during that critical waiting period before services begin?
Definitely. So I'm a private practice owner. And so I started my private practice back in 2020. I realized, I started just as a speech pathologist, seeing some clients on the side. But in the arena, or I will say the area that I am in, things started to skyrocket and spiral, a good spiral. And that just really looked like a lot more families needed assistance. And so when I realized that those families needed assistance, I started to grow the clinic. But then I also started to really hone in on what those families needed. And so looking at how to strategically offer the services, we realized that a lot of those families have the diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. So either they are undiagnosed or misdiagnosed. And so in that, what happened was a lot of parents kept asking me about different autism services that we offered, and we only offer speech. And so with the population growing and those parents continuing to ask for the autism resources, it was really a no-brainer that we had to serve the community in the capacity of more services that will assist the families, the children who have been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And one of those services were ABA, of course, that I know it's like a thing. It's a pool, some say yay, some say no. That is really how I started to hone in on the autism population. But just to go back, this has always been something that I believe truly that I've been purposed to do. I've always been in the space of special needs, special education. My mom is a special educator. My sister is a speech pathologist. My other sister is a special educator, right? And so when I was getting my graduate degree in speech and language pathology, somebody told me about ABA. And so I myself was a behavior tech. For 15 or plus years, I've been in the field of speech and language therapy, but more so honing in on autism.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I love that. And I know we talk briefly about this at the conference because there is such a long wait period for speech. There is like a gap in services because, I can tell you, and I think I did tell you this, that we reached out to many private speech therapists here. They weren't even willing to take just cash to get our children in, there is such long wait lists for speech and therapy services. So what are some practical communication strategies parents can start using right now to support their children in that gap?
Oh my goodness, everyday language. I don't think that parents really not even understand, because they do once they get a understanding of how to do it. And so I would definitely say the everyday language. We know that with autism, it's more of a pragmatic disorder or diagnosis, right? And so pragmatics is the social skills. Pragmatics is socially knowing, okay, I want to say this, and it's raining cats and dogs doesn't really mean that it's raining cats and dogs. So it's a pragmatic disorder that also could affect expressive and receptive language. So when you go throughout your day-to-day, really focusing on looking at your child's diagnosis to say, hey, is expressive language really what we're working towards increasing, or is it receptive language we're really working on increasing? And just to break those terms down, it's more so, is my child having issues with expressing themselves, or are they having issues with following directions and understanding themselves? And so when it comes to everyday language, I would say take those things in your environment and understand what your child is working on with their goals, and then use that as a baseline to use things in your environment to pull on language. So an example would be expressive language. If your child is having some expressive language challenges where their sentences are not long or they're considered nonverbal, using things in your environment, you might be driving, right? And so talking to your child about the trees and the animals outside and the schedule, what's next? Because I think a lot of people don't understand that even though your child with autism is not saying a lot, that's that expressive part, right? They are able to understand what it is you're saying. And so a lot of people think it's an IQ issue, right? It's a cognitive issue, but that's not the case. It is more so, your child can have a super high IQ and be diagnosed with autism. It's a pragmatic function. So I would really say get an understanding of what it is your child particularly is working on and use your environment. Expressive language, pulling out words, what's this? What's that? Those WH questions, that really, really helps. Receptively, like if they have receptive language goals, like understanding, I would say work on things like following directions. Are they understanding the directions? Start from one step and then increase it to 2 to 3 steps. Look at their developmental milestones and say, hey, at 3, my child should have at least 50 to 100 receptive or expressive language words. Then you in your mind as a parent, you'll say, okay, I need to start working on that. Billy only has 10, so let's try to get him to 20 by the end of the month. So really taking your child's goals, understanding them, and then carrying the compensatory strategies out that your clinician has taught. I would even say also at my clinic, we do a lot of like parent training. And so the parent training, I always say, gone are the days where we are behind the door, close the door, and we're doing therapy. We don't do therapy like that. We make sure that the parents are included. We let them know how well they're doing and what they're working on so that you guys can generalize the skill at home. Because if you think about it, we're with them an hour, right? You guys are with them all the time. So we want to make sure that you are equipped versus doing the therapy behind the door. So I would definitely say everyday language skills, following directions, that's a receptive language goal. Asking WH questions, that's an expressive language goal. Asking open-ended questions so that they can give you more language. And then maybe closed-end questions if you're just probing the language and you want maybe 1 or 2 words. And I'll add to also just this last part, usually with children who've been diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, they have a higher receptive language and a lower expressive language. So what does that look like? That looks like my child is not saying a lot, but they understand what you're saying. They understand what you're saying. They'll probably giggle at what you're saying. I don't ever want you parents to think that your children are not smart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's totally different. And I won't get into it, but it's totally different.
What I love about you is that you break it down for those who are not SLPs to understand.
Yeah.
So while I am a clinician, I know a little bit of speech and language pathology terms. I'm not an expert in it. So the way
Yes.
you just broke it down may help me understand, right? Because I
Mhm.
know what I see a lot is they'll say it's a comprehension issue. It's a comprehension issue. And
Mhm.
what they're breaking down is the fact that my child can't see beyond the text because they're reading right what's in front of them, right? But they can't
Mhm.
imagine what's beyond the text and
Yeah.
what's to come next. And how
Yeah.
you're saying to probe with certain questions. Now I know in my mind, if I
Mhm.
am asking these questions in a certain manner, I can help them see beyond that text. I can help.
100%. 100%. And then seeing beyond that text, that is a pragmatic social because you have to put it all together, right? And that's that executive functioning where, okay, I can read the information, but now I need to examine it. I need to now ask questions. And so just a tidbit to piggyback off of that too, Maria, I would say for parents who are using WH questions, who, what, when, where, why, who, what, when, those are going to be the basic questions that you want to start off with because those questions will give you one word answers, two word answers. They're very basic: who, what, when. When you get into why and how, who, what, when, where, why, and how, those are the ones that are the more executive functioning. Let me go back and just like you said, go behind the text and digest this so I can give you an explanation, and not just an answer. So that's for all the parents that are listening. If you're going to work on WH questions and that receptive language goal, start with who, what, when, and where, and then eventually you'll get to why and how. And you can take that back also to your speech pathologist to say, hey, should they really be starting with this? And they might look at you like, wait, how do they know that? But I told you guys, you are becoming the professional. We're not putting it on you, but we need definitely those wraparound services.
And I love that.
Mhm.
You made it clear that parents shouldn't have to wait to support their child's growth. How do you help caregivers feel empowered and equipped even without a full care team in place yet?
Oh my goodness. One of the words that you said was empowered. And so that is what we are working through in the Empowered Parent Circle. The Empowered Parent Circle is a community of parents who are in the interim of waiting or they just need those wraparound services. And so I find that in the hundreds of families that I've worked with, I think the main reason why a lot of parents don't take the initiative is because they just don't know. They just don't know. And so instead of them not knowing and their child regressing or you being on a wait list and you don't know the next steps, you're waiting for the SLP, but not knowing that, hey, I can jump over here to ABA and they might be giving me the same, but I'm in the waiting, so I really try to help parents through the waiting because what happens is you're waiting for services, but unfortunately, your child is regressing while you're waiting because you don't really know, what to do in those times. And so what we do is, like the micro training? So one thing that myself and my team have realized is that I know that parents need the assistance, but they don't need the assistance in a long PDF, right? When your child is acting up in the grocery store or tantruming, right? And they're wanting something, you're not going, let me go to this PDF and see, okay, first, second, third. No, it needs to be second nature. And so I always say you can demonstrate you know something with your ability to repeat something back at will. And so our goal is to teach the parents in order for them to repeat. And so what we do is like micro trainings. Last month we sent out micro trainings about developmental milestones, what to look for in your child if you're getting an early detection of something, what those developmental milestones look like and how you can maneuver through that while you're waiting for services. So standing in the gap is getting a program that will allow you to understand your child's diagnosis, because that's the first thing, understanding that my child has been diagnosed with autism. But what is that? What is autism? Maria, we know you and your husband are very educated people who know these things.
Mm-hmm.
But everybody does not know these things. And I always say, parents come into the clinic and they have all of this paperwork, and they're looking just for help. They're looking for help. They're looking for guidance. Okay, Quintina, what's next? That's like giving me, as a mechanic, giving me a car to say, hey, go put a catalytic converter in this car. And I'm like, wait. No, I can't. I don't even know how to do that, and so you're giving me a diagnosis of autism, but okay, that's fine. But what do we do next? And so that's really where I want to fill that gap. And what do we do next? And how do I steward over my child's growth throughout this process of learning autism, learning what it all entails? How active do I have to be as a parent? Some parents are quitting their jobs or, trying to figure it out. There are parents that are lost, and we're just trying to help them get to understanding what this new life is and how do I adjust in it.
Exactly. I know for us, one of the things that we're constantly seeing is that fear, the confusion, the isolation. And what I tell professionals is that we are oftentimes the first expression, the first contact with autism to that parent. So however we maneuver and think and express that to them, that's them, what's in their mind, because we're the professionals, right? So if I'm looking at deficit-based, this is horrible, this is bad, the parent takes that on. But like you said, if we're empowering, if we're using strengths-based language, if we're being neuroaffirming, that not only changes that parent's mindset, but it sets that child to go from surviving to thriving as well. So it's so important for us to really meet parents on their level and to also approach it in a means to make them feel empowered, like you said. And we'll actually have the link to Quintina's Empowered Parent Circle in the show notes so you all can check it out. Something else I wanted to piggyback off in this conversation is, as a SLP, how do you help parents move from fear and confusion into clarity and advocacy, especially after they are receiving that autism diagnosis? And not just parents in general, but Black parents.
Education. We get so many parents who come and they don't know. And so, like I said, undiagnosed, misdiagnosed, they just don't know what's next. They don't even know really, and they're undiagnosed because they don't know what to look for. So if you look at the trajectory of being diagnosed and getting that diagnosis at a young age, you have to look at what does that look like for the child? And so what I try to do is educate the family to say, hey, this is what the child is presenting with. And so this is what it kind of looks like, but I cannot necessarily say that this is what it is because I can't diagnose autism spectrum disorder. But I have been doing it for so long that I do know for sure, even in a child that's 2 or 3. And so just piggybacking off of that, one of the clients' families that came into the clinic had been to several clinics in our area, but he didn't see anyone that looked like me. And so that was Black, right? And so I remember talking to the family, educating them and letting them know it's really about service delivery, because it's not the worst thing in the world. It's just not, you might start to have to live, do certain things a different way, but we're all changing, and our environments are changing. So really empowering them in this is what it looks like. And this is what this looks like in the plan of care. And this is what I need from you as the parent so that the prognosis increases. So it's really education. It's really being understanding of what the family might be entailing as far as emotionally, as far as I don't know. And so I'm confused. I'm angry. Right. So maneuvering that to empower them to say, hey, this is not what you're thinking it is. And the only reason why you think think it's that way, it's because you don't have the information. And 9 times out of 10, it is really that the parents don't have the information. And that guy, the family that came in and said, hey, I haven't seen anyone like you, he actually told me in the clinic, he said, Quintina, I had told them, I want you to go get a developmental diagnosis or a diagnosis that will diagnose autism, because there's some things that I'm seeing. And instead of you regressing because you kind of see it at 2, but you don't really get help until 7, that early intervention is critical. So we talk about that too. And he's basically said, I receive what it is you're telling me, Quintina, and I only receive it because you look like me. And so more clinicians that look like us and that have the knowledge and also are in it for the transformation, I think we can get to the parents who are not sure. And so that's really how we steward over those parents in the season of whether just getting a diagnosis or trying to move through it, is really just stewarding over the information and letting them know, giving them that hope and empowering them to do something outside of what they think is an issue, So really education and empowerment is how we do that.
I love that. I'm always a big fan of education and representation. I think that the fact as professionals, because, in most fields, we only make about 4% of the profession, or especially when we're getting to higher ed
just thinking
degrees. It's hard to find a professional that looks like you, right? But when you do, and they're using the same language, they're using language that you understand, they make you feel comfortable and at home, it's easier for that client, that parent, that patient, whatever, to receive what's going on. So I'm always a big, big fan of education and representation. We just need it for our community.
Yeah. And then to add to that too, Maria, is us as African-American clinicians getting into spaces like this. Because I feel like we can relate this back to the field of speech pathology. Our caseloads are huge in the schools. They are huge, but more Black clinicians going to those urban areas to say, just like you said at the beginning of this interview, you're breaking it down, Quintina. And one of the things, because I worked in the elementary school, one of the things that I absolutely despised was going into these meetings using all of these words, because what are you talking about? And I know what you're talking about, but how is the parent supposed to understand what phonological processes are, how apraxia is not only going to affect them in the educational setting, but how is it going to affect them at home? What do I do at home to assist? So those IEP meetings are cringy when you're using all of these big words and you're expecting the parents to understand. But just like you said, those emotions, defeat, insecurity, all of those, if you look at all of those emotions, eventually, what is a parent going to do? They're going to retreat. They're going to take their hands off of it. And instead of getting help at 3, they're going to let the frustration build up and you're on the wait list. And look at what we're dealing with life right now,
Exactly.
So I wanted to add that us African-American clinicians having a heart to serve our community, not taking those other kids out, but giving us a chance to educate those families. Because like you said, even though we're not climbing up the ladder of, I'm the 3% of speech pathologists, they call this the white woman's best kept secret. And I can tell you that now. So this is something that has been going on and on. But so as long as our clinicians that are African-American are going into the schools, just being intentional and know, just like you said earlier too, you wanted speech pathology, but they wouldn't even take cash. It's like, it's not even about the money. It's about the capacity of the clinicians.
Yes, you're right. And one of my children, I won't disclose who, because I don't want to get the SLP in trouble. The SLP has taken over said child's caseload, and the SLP is Black. And this is the first time in a long time for this particular child that I've had an SLP that was just so welcoming and upfront and honest. They called and they were like, because I didn't even know this was happening with my child. My child was not receiving their speech services because there was nobody in the district to cover the service. I didn't even know that and I'm very involved. Everybody knows how involved I am with my children. I wasn't even alerted to or known that this was happening. And this SLP had an honest conversation like, hey, we're trying to catch up. We're going to have to talk about compensatory services in said child's IEP meeting. Had they not given me the heads up to then go and talk to my attorney about what was going on, they would have left us in the dark because we didn't know. Right. So them just being honest, having an honest conversation and speaking my language was what I appreciated more than anything. And I was like, oh, this is different. This is
because and parents don't realize that is illegal.
Exactly. And schools will do it all the time. I'm always at said child's school about them and things they're not doing. And y'all probably know who I'm talking about right now. But I had no clue. They were not informing me. And of course, said child has some communication, deficits that we are working on. So it's not like they're going to be able to express that I'm not getting this service, right? So that honest conversation was something that I so appreciated because now I know what I have to advocate in addition to everything else in this IEP meeting.
And so that even speaks to the parents that are listening, Maria, because of the nationwide shortage. There has to be something in the gap.
Yes.
There has to be. Because right now we have a wait list of 120 kids waiting for speech. And we have a wait list of over 70 waiting for ABA. And so that's one of the reasons even why I started EPC, because what are these parents doing in the interim? What is happening? And generally it's generally nothing, so that is something that I want clinicians to do as well. Just like you said, you were informed by someone like us who cared enough to say, hey, girl, you might think that they're doing this, but they're not.
They're not. And that was the reason we were also trying to get the outside of school SLP. Sure. Nobody, I'm like, y'all, I'm offering cash money.
Yeah.
Like cash money.
I know.
Still can't even. I was like, I might need to go back to school at this point and pick up another degree because
that's horrible.
It's horrible in our district. And, so I'm so thankful for individuals like you. And I'm probably going to be joining the Empowered Parent Circle once we're done with this. So I can know what to do for my kids.
Yeah. And the structure and everything is laid out for everyone to kind of see. Because what I also know about my parents is that parents of children with special needs also need to trust.
Yeah.
And it's not, I have chills. And it's not necessarily that you guys don't trust, but you have been abused in situations that you don't know. And it's easy for you guys to be abused because you don't know, so someone who has the heart to serve is going to be important. And I'm not saying that EPC is it might be specifically for the people. I know that it's for the people, but they might have another group that they are joining or another community. And community is where, listen, and Maria, Autism in Black, that's community. Community is where parents thrive because people cannot take advantage of what you don't know. And it's taken me over 15 years to know everything I know, so I know as a parent, just getting a diagnosis and nothing is critical. We have a family right now they have a child and they have had to actually separate from the child themselves, and because the child is violent and the mom has a newborn, and it's how do I navigate this? So we're helping her navigate all of the services that she might need, and putting things in place for her. So no, and even in my clinic, no, we're not just accepting cash because it's more so, it's a journey. It's a journey that we have to take with the parents. And that's something that you guys deserve.
I love that.
Yeah.
And as we wrap up, I want to ask you, for the parents listening who's still waiting on services or feeling unsure about what to do next, what's one thing that they can do today to start supporting their child?
Join a community. You have to join a community. Autism in Black, Empowered Parent Circle. There are so many communities, but also deciding on the community, but understanding what resources they give you, right? And so even though you're a part of these communities, there is not a community that I know of that is led by a speech and language pathologist that can give you, well, speech and language pathologist with a private practice that also has ABA therapy that can give you so much knowledge versus those communities, even like Autism and Black, that you need to be in, that is advocacy, that's education as well, that is led by professionals that understand the journey, but then also have walked it before you. So understanding the communities, right? And so understanding that this community is going to give me this and this community is going to give me this. So in the interim, the first thing I would say is join a community, and then it all spirals in a good way from there.
I love that. And like I said, we'll have the link to both communities
Yes.
in the show notes as well. Quintina, thank you for being on the podcast. This has been amazing. Like I said, y'all, I'm really about to join. So y'all probably see me in that community.
Yes. Yes. Eventually, we're going to get Maria up in there. Yes. Yes. We're looking for transformation. We're not looking for anything outside of transformation for your family and for your child. So
thank you very much. And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. And we will catch you on the next episode.
Bye.